Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I wish you all a happy Burns night, an evening to celebrate the life and work of Robert Burns, whether at home with your friends or maybe at a ceilidh with a dram of whiskey, a plate of haggis or with one of his poems in hand. So today I will not take you on a walk with me through the Scottish Highlands, but rather on a journey through the life of one of Scotland's greatest poets. And as I do that, I will raise my glass today with Lochlea Whisky, which comes from a distillery in Ayrshire that grows its malting barley on the same land where Robert Burns himself once worked and lived. And it is his land as well that we celebrate today, Scotland. People from around the world are joining to honour the great bard, while also celebrating Scottish culture, its nation and its history. It is impossible to discuss Burns and his poetry without recalling the wild and rugged highlands, the misty glens or the vast and scenic lochs. And if you wander through the Scottish mountains, on a morning with a deep red sky and a fog slowly lifting, who wouldn't have some of Robert Burns' most beautiful verses in their head?
My heart's in the Highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the Highlands, a-chasing the deer. A-chasing the wild deer and following the roe. My heart's in the Highlands, wherever I go.
Yet, as much as Robert Burns' poetry draws us closer to the magic of the Scottish Highlands, he himself was not particularly fond of this northern part of the world. He never learned Gaelic, the language of the Highlanders. In his poems he largely used lowland Scots. And when he wrote about his journey through the Scottish Highlands, he didn't hesitate to describe the area as wild and savage. And he was only truly moved by the Scottish landscape when it served as a backdrop for history.
For example, in June 1787, after his first great journey through the Highlands, Robert Burns wrote a few lines about his rather mixed experiences to his close friend Robert Ainslie. My dear friend and arch-brother, I write you this from my tour through a land where barbaric streams rage over barbaric mountains, thinly sown with barbaric herds, starving, acting as barbaric inhabitants.
While we may not entirely share the great poet's view, there is no doubt that Robert Burns has found a lasting place in our hearts. And this is why today, along with thousands of others around the world, we gather to celebrate the annual Burns Supper.
But to say that Robert Burns did not love Scotland would be completely false. He had an abundance of love to give, to his nation, his friends and his women.
Burns formed many close friendships throughout his life, as shown in his many letters which have been widely published. And his deep affection for his friends is also reflected in his poetry. One of the best-known examples is Epitaph on My Own Friend, written for his longtime family friend William Muir, a miller from Tarbolton, after his passing.
An honest man here lies at rest, as ever God with his image blessed. The friend of man, the friend of truth, the friend of age and guide of youth. Few hearts like his with virtue warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. If there is none, he made the best of this.
When it came to women, Burns not only formed deep friendships over the course of his life, but also experienced profound love, as many know. His love affairs, of course, had their consequences, and so he fathered 12 children with 4 different women. At least these are the ones we know of.
His favourite bonny lassie was probably Agnes MacLehose, known as Nancy, whose husband, what happy coincidence, lived in Jamaica. Nancy loved the great poet's work, and Burns, of course, loved women. It didn't take long before the two developed a strong connection in 1787. And though they didn't meet every day, they exchanged an extensive correspondence, writing to each other under the pseudonyms Clarinda and Sylvander.
However, this close platonic bond came to an unexpected end when Robert Burns, to everyone's surprise, married the country girl Jean Armour. Nancy was outraged, cut off all contact, and after a time followed her husband to Jamaica. Burns was heartbroken, which led him to write one of his most beautiful love poems in response.
I'll ne'er blame my partial fancy, nothing could resist my Nancy, but to see her was to love her, love but her, and love forever.
Yes, when it came to women, Burns was certainly unstoppable. But one episode in his life took a rather disastrous turn.
To lift his spirits, Robert Burns often spent the long Scottish evenings with his close friend Robert Riddle of Glenriddle, the laird of Friar's Carse near Dumfries. Unfortunately, these visits didn't become a lasting tradition, as Burns made quite a serious mistake at a party in January 1794.
The evening began without incident, and as was customary in the English and Scottish countryside at the time, the ladies and gentlemen retired to separate parlours after their hearty dinner.
The ladies, of course, to chat over a cup of tea, and the gentlemen to smoke and sip their port. The gentlemen did not miss out on a cultivated conversation either, and that evening, one topic in particular dominated their lively discussion, namely an episode from Roman history, the rape of the Sabine women.
Fueled by port wine and the heat of the moment, the gentlemen decided to reenact this historic event. They put their plan into action and, well, the evening ended in a scandal.
The next morning, Burns was inconsolable, his head throbbing like a rock. In his misery, he wrote his famous Letter from Hell to the hostess of the evening, Mrs. Elizabeth Riddle. Madam, I write you from the regions of hell. If I could in any measure be reinstated in the good opinion of the fair circle whom my conduct last night so much injured, I think it would be an alleviation to my torments. For this reason, I trouble you with this letter. To the men of the company I will make no apology. Your husband, who insisted on my drinking more than I chose, has no right to blame me, and the other gentlemen were partakers of my guilt. But to you, madam, I have much to apologize.
I am sorry to disappoint you, but our dear Rabbi Burns never got any mercy. The lady of the house could never forgive him, and when her husband died shortly afterwards, it was clear that Burns would never see Friar's Carse again. However, his deepest love was reserved for Scotland and its people, whose tragic history he immortalized in many of his works. He struggled to come to terms with the defeat at Culloden in 1746, when the supporters of the exiled Stuart dynasty, led by Bonnie Prince Charlie, were finally defeated by the forces of the English king. This is reflected in one of his poems published in 1791.
Now life is a burden that bows me down, sin I tint my bairns and he tint his crown. But till my last moments my words are the same. There'll never be peace till Jamie comes hame.
Not to mention the union of England and Scotland, which was sealed in 1707 under Queen Anne. Burns viewed it as a betrayal and a sellout of his country, and filled with grief and anger, he wrote the following words.
Farewell to our Scottish fame, farewell our ancient glory, farewell even to the Scottish name, say famed in Martial's story.
His deepest admiration, however, was reserved for the glorious William Wallace, who rose against the English King Edward during the First Scottish War of Independence. As Burns himself wrote, Wallace's story poured a Scottish prejudice in my veins, which will boil along there till the floodgates of life will shut in eternal rest.
With his famous song, Scots wha hae wi Wallace bled, Burns immortalized not only Wallace, but also his successor, Robert the Bruce, who triumphed over the English at the legendary Battle of Bannockburn in June 1314. It was there that Bruce inspired his men with the very same words, "Scots wha hae wi Wallace bled."
Finally, when we consider the work and legacy of the great Robert Burns, who not only wrote his own remarkable poems, but also collected and preserved old folk ballads, he undeniably takes his place among the heroes who fought for the Scottish land. Therefore, I invite all of you to raise your glasses and join me in a toast to one of Scotland's greatest poets. And I dare say, one of the greatest poets the world has known. We raise our glasses not just as admirers of this immortal bard, but as friends, as lovers, and, if we all may today, as Scots. Sláinte. Wallace's story poured a Scottish prejudice in my veins, which will boil along there till the floodgates of life will rest in eternal till the floodgates of life will shut in eternal rest. Wallace's story poured a Scottish prejudice in my veins, which will boil along there till the floodgates of eternal life will shut in rest. Till the floodgates of life will shut in eternal rest. Till the floodgates of life will shut in eternal rest.